Welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Ultimate 180 podcast. If you have ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, or even trapped in your own life and wish you had a complete life makeover, then you're in the perfect place to learn how to pull an Ultimate 180 and change your life beyond all expectations. I'm your host, Christina Walker, and today I'll be introducing you to a way of moving forward when bad things happen. In fact, this process can be used whether you're dealing with a smaller disappointment in life, or it's really extremely effective during major life crises or losses, events, anything that you feel could be out of your control, but leaves you feeling like your world has been turned upside down. And the quicker you can recover and move forward in your life, the stronger and more resilient you will become for whatever comes next. That's why this process is so important if you want to continue in the right direction, especially when you are trying to transform your life. If you want to continue on the right path to a life where you are energized, joyful, fulfilled, then you'll want to stick with me in this episode, where I'm going to share with you my rapid recovery process. Let's get started as we navigate change together, 1 degree at a time. Let's do this. Over the past 20 years of coaching, I have worked with business owners, entrepreneurs, employees, contractors, vendors, all areas, all levels. And the one thing I began to recognize was that top performers in every single category had one thing in common, and that was their ability to be resilient. These people seem to have an extraordinary ability to quickly work through the toughest situations, where others, they seem to be permanently scarred in some way. And sometimes people just give up. In fact, this really became very apparent as I worked with business owners and leaders through COVID. And as I'm sure you probably remember, there were some great businesses out there and they just failed. And then there were others that still surprised me to this day, that they continue to strive. And it's all because of the people involved. And yes, there were some cases where it seems like maybe it was just a lack of funds, or they were in a highly affected area at the time. But I have to tell you, after being witnessed from an insider's perspective, 90% of the time, it was truly the resiliency of the people involved. And that's when I realized what resiliency really looks like, and that it was a teachable skill. And to teach it to people so that you can better survive and still be able to make gains in life despite, okay, I need to back up. I'm going to stop there, people. Little pause. I was saying that weird. Go back to there. And that's when I realized what resiliency. That is not easy to say. And that's when I realized what resiliency really looks like. And it was a teachable skill to better survive and still make gains in life, despite all the things that can happen. And that is how my rapid recovery process came to be. What makes this easy to remember and very doable is that I've simplified the process into 3 different parts. And honestly, this simple method is easy enough that I've actually used it with my kid through all the little tragedies of life. And it's powerful enough to get you through a pandemic, because it did for many people. So, okay. So the first thing I tell people to do in this method is you got to let your feelings out. When something bad happens, something tragic, something awful, you lose your business, the stock market crashes. I mean, I don't know. Something bad happens. You just let it out. And it's so important. People like to pretend that everything's okay and move forward. And it's not. It's not okay. It's going to bubble up in there. So let it out. Have a full on pity party if that's what you need to do. But it's really important to get it out. Please, no harming any other people, dogs, cats, pets, or yourself. But whatever your method is of getting it out, scream in a pillow, go take a walk, just separate yourself from the situation and let yourself go. Just let it out. And you're not going to let it all out. I mean, if it's a big enough disappointment, tragedy, whatever it is, it is going to take a while. And of course, those feelings are going to come back up. So when I say let it out, just the initial shock, the initial disappointment, the initial sadness, whatever it is, let it out. And the key here is that you've got to give that a time limit. And that is the most important part. And when I say a time limit, it really depends on the severity of what just happened. Because if it's, like a little kid, right? They drop their ice cream on the floor. Let them have their moment, get it out and say, okay, you have 5 minutes. You just let it out. You get mad, you get sad, because that's, as humans, we need to get it out. Let them get it out. And then about 5 minutes later, you're like, all right, time to move on. Right? I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but I'm going to keep going. You'll start to understand, because in your own life, that would seem like I can't just move on. So here's what happens when you hold on to those feelings and you continue on focusing on the problem and the sadness and the pain and all of that for too long, it binds you. It actually binds you to the problem. And it's very difficult to get out of that. The longer you're in it, the longer it's going to take you out. And you are really, really bound to it. And that's why you see people that bad things can happen and they can move forward. It's not because they don't care. It's because they have compartmentalized, like, okay, I'm going to allow myself in this moment to have this set a period of time. And then I have to be able to put a line in the sand to move forward. And that doesn't mean that all the pain goes away. It doesn't mean that you don't care, right? It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that it is time to move forward, because it is still important that you move forward in life to get the life that you deserve. And the only way to do that is to allow yourself to have your moment or moments, because this means, it might come back. You might get frustrated again, sad again, whatever it is. Have your moment, but then set a time limit again, right? And your time limit doesn't need to be 5 minutes. It could be, it could be minutes, depending on how difficult whatever the problem is. It could be hours, it could be days, it could be a week, but try and put a reasonable limit on where you're going to say, okay, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm sad, but I'm going to now start in a different direction. And yes, it's going to come back, but you've got to draw that line in the sand. Okay. So the first one is allow yourself that pity party and make sure that you give it a stop. Give it a cut, stop, limit on the time. And then the way to move forward from that is the second step. And that is the way you actually cut it off and make the turn, is that you've got to start to gain perspective. And you might be thinking, well, how the heck am I going to do that? Like, this is awful. My brain is there. Right. And this is a trick that I use all the time, especially when something big happens. And I know on one of my episodes, I talked about if your life kind of seemed like if it was a maze you had to get through from where you're at now to where you want to be, right? So in that instance, I said the lights have to be off, because in real life, you don't know which way to go. So pretend for a moment that you have a satellite view now of your entire life and that maze, right? Of you getting from where you're at in life and everything that's going to happen. Pretend the future is laid out and you elevate yourself to a satellite view of everything. And let's say you can tell yourself, wow, I know that horrible thing just happened, but it saved me from something worse, or it could have saved me from something worse. So think of it, let's say, because from a bird's eye view, from a satellite view, right? You can see everything. You'd be able to see every road you take, everything, all of the options available. And sometimes going left or right are your options, but neither of them are great. That does happen in life. And so maybe because you took one road instead of the other, maybe that saved you from something worse. And you're not going to know what that is. So, one more example. Let's say you're driving in a car and you are stuck behind 2 hours of traffic because there's some accident up the road, or maybe you even got an fender bender and now it's going to be like 2 hours out of your day. If you can take a bird's eye view in that moment, instead of sitting with the anger, sitting with the frustration, and say, you know what? This could have been much worse. And sometimes you don't even know how. Like, I don't even know how this could be worse. But you know what? There's always something worse. And if you can feel that, like, wow, that just saved me something worse, because maybe if you had taken the other road, maybe you would have been in a catastrophic accident and maybe you wouldn't even be here, right? Something worse can always happen. And so a way to gain perspective immediately is to try and think about that for yourself. Wow, you don't have to think about what could possibly happen, but sometimes that helps us, right? What is a worst case scenario? Wow, that could have happened. You know what? Maybe this just saved me from that. And then what that does, it takes your mind, it unbinds you from the problem itself, and it puts you in kind of a grateful state of mind. And when you're in a more grateful state of mind, your mind is much more open to see the next opportunity and to see what's coming next. Because when you are bound to the problem, it's like putting blinders on and you cannot see what else is available to you. You can't see the other way out. You can't see that side street or that parking lot that you could zoom through and be home in 3 minutes, right? Because you're so focused and bound to the problem. And when I'm telling you, this can be a problem that's not your own, something bigger that has happened that you don't have control of, right? Maybe you suffered a job loss because the company went out of business, right? Something happened that you might not have control over. But maybe again, that opportunity is, wow, maybe 10 years from now, you're going to look back and think, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. It sucked at the time, but now I have this whole new career and my life is amazing. And it pushed me into doing, the business I've always wanted to do. You just don't know when these things happen if there was a worst case scenario. So to get yourself to gain perspective, you've got to come up with that worst case scenario, something worse could have happened mentality, to get yourself unbound so that you're feeling grateful. Now, again, the reason I'm saying you've got to gain perspective and not sit in that pity, that binding, is because when you continue to hold on to that sadness and whatever, I want people to be very clear. That doesn't mean that you don't care. I think sometimes people think, oh gosh, well, if I'm not outwardly showing everybody that I'm sad or angry or whatever the emotion is that people then are going to assume that I no longer care, or I'm no longer sad, or I'm no longer angry. You don't have to wear that as a badge. Just because you feel it inside, you don't have to wear it as a badge. You get to allow yourself to move forward. It's okay. It's okay for you to move forward, don't feel guilty about moving forward. It is your right. You deserve to have a great life. So all of those feelings, it doesn't mean they go away. It doesn't mean that they're not going to come back, but we are gaining perspective so we can continue to move forward through it, because you still got to get through it. And everybody does. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. Life keeps moving forward. And hopefully you keep moving forward with it as fast as you can. So the third thing is, after you've gained that perspective, you need to change your focus somewhere else, anywhere else, especially if there's anything positive that you can focus your attention on. And I know, as a dog owner, sometimes it's as simple as taking that little pet in your arms and looking them in the face and going, oh my God, I only have so many years with you. I'm going to enjoy every minute. And that really, when you start to realize, when you're gaining perspective and you can focus literally on something completely different, just for a few moments, it changes everything inside you. It really re-engages you in life and where you want to go. It can be as simple as that. It also can be like, you know what? I've got to do something different. I'm going to focus on, being better, doing better for myself. But it's got to be something positive, and it has to be something completely unrelated, just for a little bit. Because if it's related to whatever just bad thing just happened, those emotions are going to keep driving you back. So take a few moments, focus on something absolutely positive, and then that way you can continue to move forward. So my rapid recovery process, 3 steps, right? First, we're going to let it out, and then we're going to put a cap on it. 2, we're going to gain perspective, and we're going to get to that point where we're feeling grateful that it wasn't something worse. And then 3, change your focus on something else, unrelated and positive, to get you to want to move forward. And please just remember, it really is true. You do not have to stay in the pain forever. You deserve a great life, right? So let yourself deserve that great life. No guilt, no guilt. That pain's still going to be there, and you don't need to wear it like a badge. So I hope this has helped you today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like more information on how to incorporate these tips into your Ultimate 180, just join my VIP list on my website, ultimate180.com, and let's discover what's ultimately possible for you. You can also find all my podcasts there on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your shows.